Here we go.
This meeting is being recorded.
Go. Let's go. So, guys, here we are. First sync up, first touchdown of RWI initiative for 2024. We're here with Louding, with Stefan, and Chad coming around. That's very good to know. We have so much to share, so much to talk about, and I'm really, really excited to see where we're going with this open initiative in this year, right? This new year, and we already talked about this. Uh, so it'd be nice if we just make a check-in, like to see the spirits of it. Everybody, I know that Lauren is already in a very peculiar state, as she said it before we put to record here. So starting with you, Lauren, how you coming? How you're chiming in this first touchdown RWI initiative touchdown?
Oh, I'm good. Yeah. So I already told you I did my check-in. Stephen, I said that I've been producing social media pieces that I haven't published, but I've been producing. So I'm actually like refining my ideology and getting it down into like a program. And it's some things are just like super fiery. I can tell already. Like and like I think the ideas are unique and powerful, and I I don't think I'm the greatest express. Like I'm not great at express like having a presence, like a social media presence where I can just talk off the dome. But I look at what I'm producing and I'm thinking if this can be produced in someone else's voice with their charisma, like I think it's like something substantial. And so I would like to see how I can start raising funds for what I'm doing using the shareable resources. Like, is there something that I can use from what you've been doing, Vinicius, where I can start raising, like, even if someone doesn't have any money, that I can get something sort of quantifiable of like interest or like basically raising resources with is there I don't know how to ask the question, but I'm basically asking, like, is there some way that you've developed for people to say what resources they have and what they might be willing to give that I could use as a framework? Do you have like a framework that I can use?
Yeah, we have been experimenting via RWI, regenerative resources, this cultural Web3 regenerative protocol. We've been exploring various ways to people understand the difference between abundant resources and scarcity resources, right? Because in our daily lives, most of the resources that we use as a human being as a whole, they are so captured by scarcity logic that we tend to negotiate them or sell, acquire or trade or thing like that. So we have been doing exercises with people and projects to understand that if you are and we are a complex being, right? You are full of resources and all sorts of resources, and most of your resources you don't use it. You don't use. They are idle resources or resources that you don't put in use because because you just waste it out because you don't see a use case for them. Let's see, right? Let's look at it this way. Let's put it this way. So yeah, Lauren, we are experimenting with various types of peer-to-peer journeys to discover what can be abundant, what you can consider abundant for yourself or for your project. And we have been stimulating people to make events. Let's see, to co-create events or to co-create encounters in a very decentralized and unconferenced way, generating this common pool of shareable resources within people coming from all places and projects coming from all places. And I can say that in 1.5 years of RWI existence, we already done dozens of events doing this. So yeah, it doesn't have a proper methodology, let's put it this way, but it's like, you know, that culture, Brazilian culture thing that I talked to you, that is not really institutional, it's not really organizational. It's so we have this, you know, this very open space, to put it this way, this very open space to explore together, to do this peer-to-peer journey, to rediscover yourself as a complex being, not a white canvas, you know, that only has value if you have money in your bank, or if you have assets, or something like that. So yeah, it would be nice. We're going to start to on board, let's put it this way, to RWI in March this year. Not, but I'm here, right? I'm one of the co-initiators of RWI in Brazil. So we can start to experiment among ourselves and within Sensorica ecosystems, for instance, and start to generate a common pool of shareable resources for this pet project of yours. I don't see a problem with that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would, you know, me and TB are like 100% about like institutionalizing these like methodologies. So we're like, what is the step-by-step process for, like, is there a process? Oh, so this is what I found, like, in like we know that between us, we have a lot of talent for doing things, but how do we actually advertise that? Because a lot of people, like, if you know, people only really know that their talents by what makes money in open market. So how do you actually what is the process for getting people to be able to express what their talents are? Like, do you create like, so there are various possibilities of like an intake form, or do you have like actual like opportunities? So, you know, in these like open conferences or something, you might have like a marketplace where, you know, we might have people like come in to here and say, you know, there are these methodologies where each person says what their problem is or what their need was, and then you see who can actually like help them, because some people might not know what they can even do until they're presented with the problem. So I'm just wondering, like, how can we experiment here with develop, because I think that the minds you have in this room, you know, Stephen is the same way. I think he likes to actually like institutionalize these things too, and take these ideas and make them like systematized. So I'm just wondering, what can we do to actually make this happen?
Yeah, let's hear you, Stephen, and then hear Chad. I think Chad is already okay with us here.
Hi,
So
Chad.
Hey
guys, long time.
You know, Chad, if you face the window, we might actually be able to see your face.
I don't know. It's been
oh yeah, there we go.
it's been a really hectic journey, guys, but it's nice to reconnect. Yeah.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, really. Me and Chad, we have trying to connect for a while now, a while. And when he can, I can't. When I can, he can't. So, and I say, hey, the challenge point, the coordination point is this, you know, RWI initiative touchdown that we do on Friday. So come up there and we can talk, right? So Chad, or Chad or Stephen, let's begin with you, Stephen. your check-in in your first observations for this year's challenges when it comes to RWI initiative touchdowns.
Well, I think it's a good point, like to talk about like institutions, ideologies, but also then like practices and local spaces, right? You kind of got, if you can you give me this share screen option? Actually, I'll share my screen. I was thinking a bit about stuff.
It's already enabled for you. It's already enabled.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. One thing I've been thinking about is like how to bring some of this. No, it's still disabled at the moment. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. But I mean, it sort of comes back to what we were talking about as well. About I was thinking a lot about how do we host things remotely. This idea of hosting. How do we invite people in? How do we position the codification? One aspect is ideologies, but ideologies are kind of like the top-down codes that inform the institutions and inform our top-down work, which we need. It regulates things and it has a certain set of structures. And then there's the kind of what happens in places where it's a bit more of a productivity space, like an organisation, and then also where does it land in terms of people's personal life? So let me just see if this works now. No, it's still thinking it's not sharing. Let me just. And I think these are quite key. So actually, the good thing is actually Infusion Space deals with some of that, different kinds of spaces, because Infusion Space is kind of like, it's about how to find flexible ways.
Stefan, you can share your screen now if you want, man.
I can, yeah, let me try that. Yeah, that's good, okay. So this is one of the Infusion Spaces, like for the big scale. So you see my, can you see my mouse? You see my mouse here?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this stuff here, this organizational role thing, that's when we did that stuff on Field to Practice. Field to Practice for Infusion Spaces in this organizational role area. So the way this all set up was this is basically, it all came out of just focusing on community work, community workshops, how we show up. So this was how it started. It was like, how do we go from places where we show up and it's like a mixing and a blending? Could be like where we do group practices. Maybe you could say our discussion on here to some extent, right? You're showing up as yourselves in relation to some sort of common ground, okay? And you might want that common ground to go up to the next level, because you can only go so far until you start forming teams and organizations, and that's where you produce things generally, okay? And that could be that you're an organisation that does therapy, does theatre, does whatever it is, and generally we go up from our daily life to become a consumer of it. Up here is the most clear-cut thing. You go up from this bottom level is basically the scale of individuals freely moving, and this is the next jump is to the level of your groups or organisations where you're within some sort of regime, you're within some sort of intentional regime. So there's a difference between me having a general chat with a friend to me being a therapist where I'm contracted with someone. And anyway, the reason I mention that is because it sort of comes up to what Lo was saying. There's on the latest version of this that's been for a while now is rather than going up to another level, and previously I had institutions another level above, I actually put the institutions to the side because they're almost like a parallel world. So on the left, you've got how people show up, then you've got how we show up as professionals, and how we show up at home and how we show up as professionals. And generally the professionals, or when you start putting on these scenarios as being a professional as opposed to being blue collar, white collar, that's when you're in this world of institutions. And what are institutions doing? Institutions are essentially regulating organizations. they decide what the terminology will be. They decide what the ontology will be. They decide what the policy will be that then regulates the people that do stuff, right? Because universities don't generally produce, they regulate how you're going to teach the people that will produce, right? You train the engineers, you train the technicians, you train the financiers, right? And then you've got up here ideologies. That's what I kind of thinking is ideologies are kind of, as you go further out, you know, and that's why you got this thing between ideologies and living spaces. Yeah, go on.
Stefan, can I do a quick in and out?
Yeah, go on.
Would it be proper to understand that our relationship with the institutional dimension, the institutional universe, is more performative in the sense that you're performing a persona in there, in the way that we relate to our houses, our kin, our parents is more in the beingness mode.
Yes.
So there is quite of a the type of collisions that I see here in the most basic layer is between beingness and the beingness mode and the performative mode, right? Would you agree with that?
It's more, when you say performative, that word gets used in different ways. I would say, I would say it's more the being mode. It's more being free at the bottom level. It's more like being, supposedly you want to be free down here, okay? So down at the bottom, when you're at home, the idea is people want freedom, right? And up here, you might want quality constraints in a way. You don't necessarily just want a free-for-all when you go to an institution. So you're actually looking for some sort of constraining space. You go to a university, they're built spaces, you know? And we have that, we call it a body of knowledge. We call it the arms of the institution. You understand? We call our places a constitution. A constitution is like a man-made. We talk about the constitution of our physical body, then we talk about the constitution of our institutions. So I would say everyone, in the way I would use performative, or in some ways, I would say they're all kind of performative spaces, and each one, you can have your adjacencies and then it jumps. So I can be at home and I can imagine the groups talking about home life and the local, what it's like to have people coming out of the local factory. But when I jump inside the factory, I've gone into a different structure of being and doing. Does that make sense? I've now walked into a workplace. Does that make sense? So I've gone into a workplace here, be it a factory, and that's this organizational spaces, right? Be it a school, right? And then you've got your institution is regulating the factory, if that makes sense. And that's where your professionals are, your researchers are, all that.
Yeah, because when you go to a factory or go to your workplace or whatever, you're out there in the society dealing with different, environments or organizational, institutional environments. You're more in the performative mode than in the beingness mode, because you just want to, see if you're acquainted.
Yes.
Or if you're not acquainted, you feel that you're in the strange place. You need to come up with a persona. You need to come up with a performative act or persona to deal with it.
Well, let's say you're performing a role. So in some ways, you're performing a role. Here, you're performing yourself. So I would call it's more about doing, sort of doing rather than being. It's probably. But they're both types of performance. I mean, the word performance depends how you use it, right? But I could say I'm performing being myself. I'm performing, but there's more of a doingness about performing in role. So the difference is I'm performing in role, which I think is what you mean, is you're putting on a performance, which means you're stepping into a role to perform. But you could argue that you're performing in daily life, but just not as constrained by role. Does that make sense? And in a way, there's an argument that the reason we have the sense of self in our society as a construct is it allows us to swap out our sense of self for a sense of role. So it's me, Stephen, here at home, and now I'm going to go Stephen, the engineer in the factory, or Stephen, and I get another job, the HR manager. Do you understand? So I'm stepping into roles, but the nature of what it means to be a HR manager, or the nature of what it means to be an engineer if I'm working in a factory or a company, is not generally regulated by the factory or the company. They normally then look for direction from institutional actors who provide policies and guidances.
I understand what you're saying, but remember a conversation that we have, a RWI touchdown conversation that we have a while ago, talking about agency, how the institutional space, the organizational space, captures your capacity to have agency in this space. So the only way to have agency if you adhere with their policies, right? And if you don't adhere with the policies of that institutional organizational space, it's like you don't exist properly. Because no one is going to recognize your agency there, right?
Yes.
So yes, that
is true, but that can work both ways, right? Because it's also, I would take it, it's more like it's a regime of intention or so when you're in an institution, do as they do in an institution. Does that make sense? So the agency there is to talk about regulating and describing and researching and prescribing, but they can't actually make anything in the institution. So you bring them over to the organization, and the same thing happens the other way around. They don't have any agency, except the trouble is they do have agency because then they start setting in policies. But they don't actually have much agency to get in there and actually start making anything, if that makes sense. The difference is the institutions can give policy documents which tell other people to do stuff, which is not quite the same thing as being able to go in and have agency in the, you see what I mean? So they have a different kind of
but when you outsource the agency for the institutional organization, you generate credence around that type of agency. And the institutional organization becomes its own entity. Like we talk about markets, like it's an entity thing. Like it has its own will and things like that. So,
well, that's why you see in the middle here, you've got normally, you see I've got with 2 arrows, one says report going up. So basically the main thing, and this is where you add something different to the equation here, but traditionally in a simplified form, people get on, do their job, be it a factory or whatever, they provide some reports back to some institutional actors, be it, who then report to the government and people like that. But you have reports coming from the organisational mode, it could be to the funder, and you have recommendations coming back from the institutions in a simple sense, right? And the trouble is they're both separated. There's this sort of governance in between. They're separated by this kind of lack of human, these reports are dead. Does that make sense? So this left side is living, there's a living dynamic, and the right side is living dynamic, and there's reports going backwards and forwards. But you give something different because you give a way to maybe sit in the middle here. So it doesn't, you're neither an institution, and you're sort of finding a way to keep alive the middle, if that makes sense. That's what I would say anyway. You're bringing the ability to have a living governance that's not purely feeding something like a dead report back to the institutions where they decide, or feeding recommendations down where it gets interpreted. But you're saying that there's a sort of dynamic network of networks, and that's why I'm a bit worried about the word ideologies on its own, because ideologies up here is kind of, it's almost like what helps us navigate what we can't work out ourselves down here. So then we delegate out to the ideology, and that drives us. But each of these areas have their own experiential ecosystem of how we perform. So you're right, we sort of, or how, let's just say how we act, let's just say how we act within an experiential ecosystem. And some of these have, so this mixing and blending means that the between the home and the organization, we have community where we can have mixing and blending. That's where we have community dialogues and grounded dialogues, right? But between the institution and the house here, which I would call the House of Representatives, so this is the political house. So we have the home house and we have the political house of the professionals, and there's a mixing and blending between the institutions and this house. That's called lobbying, basically. That's there, and neither of these two can see each other. The lobbying is not available to the average man. In Canada, it mostly happens in Ottawa. In Brazil, I think it happens in Brasilia, isn't it? Or whatever your administrative capital.
But Stefan, I want to, would be really relevant for us to welcome and hear Chad and Chad's weigh in all this conjecture that you shared with us. Very, very good. I just want to make a quick observation. When you talk about the House of Representatives, you're talking about almost full-blown democracy. And in the world that we live today, we have democracy is being, let's say, attacked for autocracies. So it's very interesting. So this we can consider what you just shared as a universal case for everybody everywhere, right? And because even it doesn't even there are places out there in countries out there that it doesn't exist House of Representatives, or it's only a performative act by the government to say that there's democracy, but there's not, right? It's autocracy in that sense. But that observation made, please, Chad, be very welcome, man. Let's hear about your whereabouts, and let's go.
Hi everyone. Sure, I don't even know where to start. I honestly feel like I've been in a war zone here in South Africa, going around from community to community, trying to find out and sort of gather data on their needs and their wants and how we can kind of help facilitate. And it's kind of put me out like quite a bit, and that's why I've been offline for about a year now. I think that I came on last, but I've landed at a farm here in the Free State in South Africa, and just really settling down and touching base after like the hectic journey of being all around the country this year. And it's taken quite a toll on me, like energetically and mentally and physically. So I'm just landing really, guys, and checking in again. But the conversations that are going on here are very much tying into where I want to start getting to with building out a centralized, decentralized platform that's going to kind of connect all of these different constituent parts together. So I think after my long journeys, I'm kind of ready for that, to start delving deeper into the UX UI side of the spectrum of this, just because data is so vast and it's so deep, and different networks have so many different data points and servers, and it's really about how to correlate all of that data together for me. But I came to a conclusion or a point of sort of building out a 3D model of this that is going to be live and interoperable and kind of clickable, to start playing around in a more 3D, 4D space with some of these key points. I just find these Zoom calls and things very surface level. So I'm trying to figure out how to go deeper into it. I see you're putting your glasses on there. Vinny's perhaps like some augmented reality is the answer for me or something. I'm not sure. But so that's me. Just really like doing some healing this side. But look forward to connecting and communicating more, possibly working on a few projects together.
Okay, Chad. I quite give you a segue when I talk about autocracies and how you've been dealing with your life over Africa and the
Over the
continental.
years.
Yes.
Fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a pleasure to reconnect with you, to see you again, to see that you're alive and kicking. Let's put it this way. And
Sure.
finally, be welcome.
Thank you.
2024, right? So circling back to you, Stefan, and Pauline is in her work mode, I think.
Yeah. No, definitely. No, welcome. Nice to meet you, Chad.
Yeah, likewise.
I've done a lot of work in Ingwavuma, northern Maputoland.
Sorry, say again.
I did a lot of projects in northern Maputoland in Ingwavuma.
Okay.
And
Wow.
Nguzi up on and also down in Duncan Village and Umdanzani townships in East London.
Yeah.
But that was a while ago now.
Yeah, I've kind of been I've been all around those parts recently.
Okay.
Yeah, it hasn't been too easy though, I must admit.
It's a challenging area, isn't it?
Yeah. And I've been sort of all over the Transkei, actually all over the country this year. But I think it needs to I really need to start simplifying things from the ground up, but also from the air up, to kind of start dropping these things digitally, like into their leaders, as opposed to going in on the ground and trying to interact. It's been tough.
Yeah. Well, that's partly how I ended up. This infusion space idea sort of came from this question about how to scale up or reach up from different scales, noting that when people have these local discussions, they're talking in a particular sort of way, So people are obviously, if you're talking locally, people are more connected to their local space, right? Their local environment. And like I say, when I did these workshops, we were doing these 3-day workshops with Oxfam Australia, where people would map out their community with fabric maps and show their stories on there. And they were like, well, this is great. And everyone's having a great time. And they're having all these ideas and strategic conversations. But no one knew what to do with that. So they said, well, can we just take one person, and they take them to our war room, which again, the name is not quite kind of brutal, but that's the term they use to make it sound important. And so, well, you can, but now it's a representative. You're not taking the strategic conversation, you're not taking the dynamics, you're not taking the local stuff. Who is this representative? How can they do much more? And now they're going to be in another type of space. They're in a completely different kind of conversation, right? Of which all their local dialogue and knowledge is not available and cannot be available. It's not an ethical. It's not equity training and diversity training and blah blah blah. It's not going to get you around the problem. It's just not available to those people, right? So you've got different kinds of spaces where we literally are orientating differently. And then, so that's why I was trying to work out, well, what's happening when we go to these different spaces, and how can we, build out more stuff where there's participatory spaces involved. And it's not like it goes like, this is the rules of the game here, and this is the rules of the game here, and this is the rules of the game here. And they're very kind of static and kind of built. And where's it like, okay, this is the kind of flexible space for like finding out what's going on. And that's kind of that idea then of like thinking about the shift between an organization, be it even a community-based organization. So we're working with like local service providers and stuff like that, like HIV, health providers and educational trusts and stuff like that, who do feeding programs in schools. So it sort of almost becomes like you have to get down to some first principles, right? And because that starts, because what you seem to find is that people who are in the more institutional levels, they're desperate to try and find a way to break out because they can't really reach down. All they can do is get these single studies which get aggregated by a researcher, and then they're kind of work. how do, and the answer is you can't. You've got like different, like you've had that experience, haven't you? You've gone to different parts of South Africa and you've got different scales, you've got different levels of granularity which are at play, right? And you've got certain things which are just not available. You know, the details of water engineers, pipes and pressures and equipment, I mean, I can only sort of guess, and I've sort of had some science education, but I never really, you know, it's not available unless you're from that practice, you're from that kind of domain, right? And I think that's where some of the work with smart contracts is interesting, because it's trying to find a way to bridge that. So go for it, yeah.
I had to get out, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay, no worries.
Let me dig a little bit in what you just said,
Yeah.
Stefan.
Yeah.
Something that Louding has been doing in last year a lot, that was mapping all over this bullshit dynamics that happens in society at large, right? So how do you map bullshit in the infusion space? You're muted.
Well, I think you have to go down to the space that's a question. So the way I try to do it is just find out what's happening for people at different scales. So I ask people to say, in infusion space, you say, okay, take an experience. I either give them an experience and say what happened in that moment where you had some complex function setup, or they choose an experience, a bit like you saw Tiberius did in terms of a field of practice, or something like that, and find out what's going on and find out what the relationships are. And it's probably more about being able to get a grounding on what's happening from a grounded kind of experiential perspective, which is fairly hard to gain actually, because if you don't just do it from what is coming up genuinely, it probably just won't work. Do you know what I mean? Like, if someone asks you because you've got to remember, the bullshit generally means you're playing a game, and the game is what's being put out there rather than the reality. Whereas if I ask you what's really happening in a context, you actually are able to answer the question, it kind of has to be genuine, because otherwise you'll just be like, oh, I don't know, I can't see anything. Okay, well, you're not doing, that's fine, you don't see anything. I don't know if it's because it's bullshit or not, but I just know that unless you go genuine, you won't find anything, because it's not available, right? Because otherwise you won't have the adjacencies and the flow, unless you get into the genuine nature of the gameplay, which people may be trapped in, and we are trapped in, and that is also a genuine experience. But I think what you're talking about is just general confusion and noise and obfuscation almost. Is that what you're saying? Like, how do you get around this? And
No.
Space doesn't necessarily. It can help you work out what it could be rather than that.
You see, in my understanding, and it's based on what Louding came up with her studies and research, is that bullshitting is something that we use as a framework or as a weapon, to manipulate or to self-defend yourself in the institutional organization space, right? In order for you to increase your agency, or in order for you to alter the agency of the space itself, right? So that's why
what kind of institutional space might that be like?
Well, it would be anywhere, man. Anywhere that we as a species, as a human, we create as an institutional space, right? It can be.
What would that be? Like, what kind of anywhere is an institutional space?
The classical thing of a politician bullshitting everybody with its political platform, and he knows that most of the political platform of his campaign or his mandate is bullshit. He knows that.
Yeah, no, this is true. But let me just take that.
knows, and people knows that
Extreme.
all of it is bullshit. Yeah, so that's why I'm talking about bullshit.
Yeah, but in infusion space, that's a good. Okay, so we're taking that in infusion space. The politician, and this is there's a difference between a representative and the thing. So the challenge you get is you've got an institution, and then you've got a representative of an institution. And this comes back to that same thing, just mentioned about how we had the community and they're all having their dialogue and they wanted a representative to go to the war room. And it's a fundamental flaw, right, that this representative can capture that complexity. You've got the same problem with, I don't know necessarily whether Boris Johnson is representing accurately in his bullshit, because he's a top bullshitter, right? He's the ultimate bullshitter. What's going on? But all I've got is him as a representative. So we need to separate out representation and public representation and institutions, because you see what goes on when he walks back inside Parliament, back inside the government, which is not visible to us. Like, we don't see what goes on behind the closed door at number 10 Downing Street, or what happens in the civil service around Whitehall or whatever. You just see what the representatives represent. Because, well, in terms of my current role, anyway, I'm just a general public, right? I don't have. Now, if I happen to be in an organisational, if I happen to be an organisational company, I would also be in the same thing. I would have some sort of thing like, well, we actually make those PPE equipment. We have some idea about the PPE equipment. We still wouldn't know. Now, if I worked in a university and I was part of the research team that the government was using as a consultant, now I'd be a little bit inside. Now I'd be inside the think tank. So I'd be inside, so I might know what the institutions are doing. And that's the thing, but and those people in the institutions that are in the think tanks, they still might not actually even know how the PPE is made, right? The protective equipment's made, because their job is the policy making. You understand? So we have these. When we say institutions, like, I think you really need to use that. Institutions for me and organisations are different. Institutions regulate organisations. So the EU.
Yeah,
this is what the problem with the EU is.
I agree with you. In the actual world that we live in,
Yeah.
the societies that we came up and set up as societies, I agree that institutions regulate organizations. No disagree. I'm not disagreeing with you there.
Yeah.
I'm not really disagreeing with you. I'm just poking you all over just to see.
Well, I'm poking back your way as well, in a way. So.
Just to stress a little bit what you shared with us as the beginning of the conversation, Stefan, my friend. But let's hear about Chad, my friend. I know that Chad has one of his foot is very pragmatic in the. I don't know if it's the right or the left foot. I don't know. Or in the another one is very explorative in a very quantum reality. You see, so he has this both. He has his legs landing on all possibilities when you come to the space, and the more down to earth things that we already institutionally materialize as realities, right? So I would like to hear you, Chad, and how do you see our species evolving, considering what Stefan just shared with us, mapping out the way that we behave with ourselves, with our parents, with communities, in society at large, right? How do you weigh in your perspective?
So firstly, like from the digital space, I kind of see this singularity needing to happen from these various different platforms. I mean, currently now we're on Zoom, and then we have Discord, and we have possibly some other, social platforms and things. It's like, really, how do we start capturing this data and simplifying it and utilizing it and bringing in like some of the other platforms? I'm just using this as a very basic example. of where my head's been at. Threefold was one of them. I know you guys partnered, we're partnering with. You're familiar with Airweave as organization. And I'm just spitting out some thoughts here on like actual practicalities of this, to start like weaving them together so we can capture all of this data into a centralized point for further like evolutionary purposes. I mean, it's been a great struggle for me actually, like you know, over the years to try and bring this all together. But you know, we have the AI tools, we have our dialogue tools, and we have all these various different platforms, but they're all very fragmented in a sense. I mean, how does this conversation get built into a picture and then compiled into like a database that can then start maybe with an AI sort of thing, start weaving together like little gold nuggets or progressive viewpoints moving forward. Like Airweave was a good example to bring in because, you know, they're creating a system for knowledge like base storage. And it's like, so we have this conversation today, and then maybe I go on and we go on, and it's possibly recorded somewhere like on a hard drive or something. But how can it start being woven together in a global context? Yeah.
Yeah, we have the link in order to Stefan understand what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about, but I don't, because I know what you have been doing. But I think that Stefan just is hearing and trying to grasp what you're talking about. So if you can share in the chat, we can share our screens, and you can talk a little bit more about it in order to Stefan understand better what you're talking about. So
I guess to simplify things is to create a platform that is more centralized in its approach, or that can actually handle the multiple complexities that we're actually talking about in a visual sense of the word. I don't know how to like picture this or express it, but sort of have a globe of different things going on that you can zoom in and out of, and see this different work happening. Because I mean, the amount of data out there is vast. I could go on university websites today and all sorts of like research and so on and so on, but is that relevant to the current context? You know, like how do we develop something that is viewable, easily accessible, and in real time building out in the sense of a globe model? Is that maybe?
No, this makes a lot of sense actually, because so that thing on the infusion space, a lot of that's also like it's talking about where things are as much as we end up recording what things are, not where things are. And one thing that was coming up with Laurie is if we were to use a hosting space where you can have different kind of spaces that you can move in and out of, where you have different kinds of conversations. If that makes sense. Like we have this idea that we can, I actually disagree with the idea of the singularity. I think the singularity works when you go up and up and up, and you can refine what something is. But if you want to go more towards where something is in terms of, and as you know, like I can have 5 places in one area of Ingravuma. Each of those 5 places are also different from each other. You know, you have this granularity on granularity. Now, if you can move between where you are and what kinds of conversations you have, I think that's also part of being able to then navigate.
Stefan, I agree on your disagree. I disagree on your vision of how you vision singularity. And of course, I disagree in the sense that I I I I I I,
But you kind of
I
need both, you know.
respect it, but because for me, singularity is not a mass unique event that changes everything.
Yeah.
That's unrealistic. For me, we as distributed cognition beings, as we
Yeah.
are, our species are, we work with distributed cognition, right? Networks. So
Yeah.
the singularity event a different thing for each one. Would be something different than the singularities for you. That is for Brad. So it's not a unique thing in this sense. So it works more like a network of network phenomena because we as a species we work with distributed cognition. So we're always mirroring ourselves as monkeys, mirroring ourselves. So that's my disagreeing. But in a
Exactly. I 100% get that. Well, so we'll say you take those distributed cognitions as being experiential ecosystems with particular arrangements. So the nature of the distribution in a village in Africa is different to the non-profit organisation in the region of Africa, which is different to Johannesburg, which is also different based on whatever that organisation's doing, be it education, be it health. So you've got, but they each have a distributed awareness, right? So you've got these mini kind of granularities. So you've got both going on. Yeah, so you've got a mixture of, I see three things actually, and you've always got a middle. You either got mostly singularity with inaction, what we're doing, our body action. We've got pretty much just being in the moment, just doing stuff, or we've got this kind of deeper kind of resonance stuff, which kind of only comes when you've got people from the same place and the same kind of shared something, sort of letting things percolate. Does that make sense? And they're all really useful, and different things do, like, and at the moment what we're kind of stuck with is the middle. We're stuck with this kind of middle level where whatever we do gets translated into a form, and the form is given up to the institution or whoever the researcher is, and then that gets put into a database, and then that database, and from that point on, it's dead, right? And it's been clearly dead because we can see ChatGPT can even do a better job with us, just with nothing else but the ontological artifacts, right? So, and it's great at it, and it's good. The thing is, though, that you've got a step from the collective distributed cognition to the artifact, and that, which has been a codification because it's been written down, and then that in itself is, and so one of the things that this is, you know, we were talking about hosting before, is that's why I think GatherTown's really good, and I've been doing some work with the GatherTown, because in GatherTown you can walk around different parts of the room, and it could be like the institutional area. You can have not necessarily, you can have a different quality of distributed cognition. This is the thing, which terms you use, right? So you know distributed cognition. I was using experiential ecosystem as being a kind of a, there's a kind of a gestalt, but the thing is about contextuality to that is where the participatory work really brings that in, because in participatory work, like deep participatory work, the context is very key, right? And it is intractable. I mean, it's just intractable to penetrate. So the question becomes, how do we make this useful? I might have to go in a sec because I've just got a call coming in. But how do we make this useful and translatable? And that's what I've been having this trouble, because I work with communities with complex disability, bringing some of the work from Africa to that. I brought some of the work from Africa to newcomers in Canada. I'm in Toronto, by the way. But it was trying to bring that work across. And let me just share, I'll just do one quick thing. I'm going to share my screen to show you GatherTown. I think you might have had to take the host back. Just give me a host, oh, I got it, yeah. And this is like an office here. And we can actually go inside this office at some point. But so you see in this office here, you see I can walk around. This is the main part of the office. You've got, I can walk down, and so I've got this as like welcome, And over here is where I've now got for project planning. Okay, so this is the project planning seat. So now we could be talking and having conversations about project planning, and there could be a whole load of information on that. But that's completely different to the foundational community embedded programs where we're working with care homes. It's just a completely different type of discussion, right? Here we're talking about, now we might be talking about projects up there, but so I've got care homes, I've got public events, and again, they're quite different. Like, so where is it that I can work with different types of things? And the nice thing about this platform is I can embed notes, but I can also embed spreadsheets and websites, right? So it's possible to have conversations. This is a community I'm working with, Thorncliffe Park, and I'm still working on how to do this, to separate it. So down here, if I want to talk about community networks, I'll get the people who can talk about community networks, because some of the people I know, they really have no idea. They've never had that experience. They might be quite good at accounting. They might be quite good at marketing. So great, get them doing project planning, okay, up there. Just like you do in a company in a way, you have different departments, right? So how can we have information that we can move in and out of? And I think this sort of platform could be good for that, right? Because you can embed where you are, and then you can sort of ground yourself and say, okay, now you can have different levels of synthesis. It's okay, we've talked about community networks, we've talked about how it works on this ground here. What's it like at the project level, right? And then over here, how do we configure with some of the service providers and this is where the Infusion Lab is, right? So then that would be what we were just looking at with that infusion space, because there we're zooming out and we're trying to look at different kinds of actors, an institutional actor versus, an organizational actor versus a community, blah, 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 right? And I think this can be quite powerful for that. And I have to dash in a sec because I've got to, but this is the thing that I was thinking that Laurie would be really good, because she's good at hosting stuff like this, because you can almost host someone in here. And here's like a meeting room where you can go and have a meeting, and you can have breakout rooms in a more detailed way. And then there's one here where you can do the map of meaningful life and explore meaningfulness and dynamics that way. So it could be that, and this is what I'd like you guys' feedback on, is how can we create some different spaces here? Maybe we can do meetings where we even are able to explore some of these things in a kind of in a different kind of space,
We're already going to have our first touchdown, RWI initiative of 2024, and I think that we can experiment with GatherTown or touchdowns. We can create RWI. We can create this RWI or we can create its own GatherTown environments and connect with Infusion. Spaces created there. But this is something that we're going to talk about during the next week, right? Yeah. And it's going to be nice to see the type of work that Chad is doing and how this work can be part of this new moment of RWI initiative. And guys, just a quick checkout from in order for us to wrap up here, and that's going to be nice. So starting with you, Stefan, that you're on the block already.
Yeah, no, thanks for letting me share that. I think, like I say, I'm really interested in how Chad's work in South Africa and other places could have, use this and maybe how we look at hosting some of these things. I'm really curious on the hosting side. I think that's a strength of this group, is looking at ways to host and process and stuff. So yeah. Well, right.
I can give some examples, guys, like, and it's not just South Africa, but generally across Africa, we have stuff happening. But more recently, in the Eastern Cape region, and Transkei and stuff, we were kind of in a way mandated to onboard like 108 villages. And like me sitting, and I think this is really about this reimagining wealth concept perspective comes in, with like, you know, sharing abundance instead of lack of skills and energy and stuff. I'm kind of sitting here and like my car's in the workshop and I don't have money, and it's like, but I've been mandated to kind of facilitate the I think industrialization is maybe the wrong word, but kind of the upgrading of like 108 villages, which each village consists of like, you know, a couple of hundred families. I'm just sitting there like, oh man, okay, cool. So where do we start? How do we begin to aggregate, even like, you know, from top down and bottom up? And they're still waiting there. I mean, we have literally whole sectors of the country that are like ready and raring to collaborate and give input and outputs and their knowledge, and it's really about how that collective knowledge is aggregated and put together as well. It's quite a task at hand. So yeah, just quickly, because yeah, I'll give my checkout, but that's kind of like, yeah, the hecticness of like the energies that have been going on, and where the world is actually currently at, you know, across the board. So yeah, that's me.
Okay, Chad. Well, that's incredible, man. we have to talk about more about that and see how in the type of energizing, co-creative energy that we want to spotlight for RWI initiative for 2024. So yeah, that would be really nice. And yeah. Well, Tim is here. So Tim, we're actually already going to the checkout dynamics, but it's going to be nice, man, just to hear about you. So if you will, you can make a type of check-in and check-out thing. So here, hey guys, I'm here, and wow, it's good. And give your vision, your understanding of what would be the challenges of RWI initiative for 2024. Be welcome, my friend. Tim, are you here with us? Maybe it's something related to his sound system. I don't know. Okay, man, we are already signing off here too. So that's it. Bye, guys. See you next week, and let's continue, because it's we're just starting.
One quick question: could we connect over the next couple of days if you have a moment? Just to have
yes, we will. We will connect. I'm actually going to be on the road, as you have been on the road, but we want to have the opportunity to connect. Okay, Chad.
Cool.
Hey guys.
Cool.
Bye.
Yeah.